Welcome to the next video in our Proxmox series. In this video, we will be configuring users and groups in Active Directory. All right, so to configure our users and groups, we'll go up to the right-hand corner, this time under the Tools drop-down, and then we will select Active Directory Users and Computers. Now you'll see in the tree menu, we want to select eCore Local. If we first look at users, what you see is, in addition to users, you also see groups listed under users. This is out of the box. So we will right-click the domain, new, and we will choose new organizational unit. And this will be groups. Let's select OK. And now you see groups is listed underneath eCore Local. So now we can go back to users and we can basically sort those and take all these groups, highlight, right click, select cut, open the groups folder or organizational unit that we just created, and then paste them. What that does, just helps a little bit on the house cleaning, helps to keep everything a little bit better organized. If we separate the users from the groups, it's really a personal preference. If you don't want to do that, by all means, there's no reason that you should have to do it. So after we've moved those groups, we want to go back to the users, and we're going to right-click Administrator, select Copy, and then we're going to go ahead and fill in these fields. So the first one we'll type in is Terrell Wellick is the user, and he will be an administrator. And then we will select next after we've filled in the username and the logon name. Basically, in this domain, eCore, the naming convention is the first initial and last name. And then we will assign him a password. We'll go ahead and set this up so that the password never expires. Obviously, that is not the best practice in a domain environment. And then we will go ahead and select next. All right, you can review it real quick, then select finish. And now we want to do it one more time. So administrator, and we'll select copy. And this will be a service account. So the service account will be a SQL account. So we're just going to put first name SQL or SQL and the last name service. And we'll just give it a login name as SQL service with no spaces. And then we can select next. Now we're going to give it a name, a password name called my password 123 with a pound sign. We'll type it again. It's in the walkthrough, but it's capital MY and then password 123 and then the pound sign. We also do not want it to expire. Select yes, and then we'll select finish. Now what we want to do is go to the properties. We right click, we'll go to properties. In the description, since this is a service account, this is highly not recommended. However, somebody may type something like the password is my password 123 and the pound. And then we will select apply. So obviously this is not best practice. However, it has been known where administrators, because it's a service account, they don't think anything about that. And throughout some of our labs, we'll see how that can be exploited. So next thing, we want to add another user. So we can just right click inside this field. And we want to select new. Then we want to select user. So a couple accounts that we want to create. The first one is Philip Price, who is the CEO of eCore. Once again, the naming convention, we're just using the first initial, last name. We've set that, then we select next. We do not want the password to expire. And we deselect user must change at next login. Once again, these are not recommended practices. This is just setting up our lab environment. Just make sure you're keeping track of whatever you're naming the passwords. Select next. And then finish. And so that's one account. We'll go ahead and create another user, same way, just right clicking inside this field, new, and then go down to user. This time we will create the account for Terry Colby, who is the eCore CTO. We'll select next. Deselect the user must change a password. Type in the password for Terry Colby. Then password never expires. So we completed that. This is all the accounts that we'll set up for right now. And then the next thing we want to do is set up a file share. So we're going over to the file and storage services. So we'll go ahead and select that. Once we've selected that, we want to select shares. Then from the drop down, we want to select new share. So it's about the middle of the page, a drop down that says tasks. We'll select new share. We'll just keep the SMB share quick selected, and we'll select next. And we can go ahead and select next because now we want to give it a name. So we are going to give it the share name as Steel Mountain. Keep the other at the default values. We'll click next. And we want to make sure allow caching of share is selected. It is. So we'll select next. And we will go ahead and select next on the permissions. We're not going to change anything. And we can review everything really quick, and then we can select create. Now that that is completed, we will select close. Now what we want to do is configure a service principal name. And that's really just finishing up that SQL Service account that we created, but we want to set up the SPN. So we can open the command prompt on the administrator or as administrator. Now to set the SPN, we use the syntax here, and it is in the walkthrough. So it's set SPN -A, and then to the ecore/SQL service.ecore.local gives a port number and the SQL Service account. Once we've done that, we can hit enter. And as you can see, it's registering the service principal name. And we can check it just by running this command, which is set SPN-T. Basically, it should list all the service principal names on the system. And it is confirmed the existing SPN was found. Now what we want to do is to set up a group policy. So to do that, we'll go to the search window down the bottom, and we'll start to type group, and we want to select group policy management. Once the group policy management window opens up, what we want to do is open the drop down for the forest, and then drop down on domains. We want to highlight ecore.local and then right click, and we want to create a GPO in this domain and link it here. So we'll just select that. And the GPO we want to name it Disable Windows Defender. And then select OK. Now what we want to do is hit the drop down. We see Disable Windows Defender. We want to click it. And what we can do is right click that and select Edit. Now we'll go from Computer Configuration down to Policies, down to Administrative Template, and then Windows Components. This is very similar to what we did on the individual workstations. Then what we want to do is scroll down to Microsoft Defender Antivirus. Expand this out to make it easier to see. And we see turn off Microsoft Defender Antivirus. We want to enable that policy. So the policy is to turn it off. So we are enabling the policy to turn it off. And then we can close the group policy management editor. Now we can right click the policy again, and let's select enforced. So now we see the status of it is enforced and it is enabled. That finishes what we're going to cover for setting up users and groups and policies. In the next video, we will actually domain join our two Windows workstations.